we made Deadstream as a huge swing. Everything about it, we put everything on the line for the movie. Why would we stop doing that right now when this guy's telling us there is a shot, a small shot, but a shot? So we came back and said, all right, let's do it. Let's talk to the sales agent. We withdrew from the path that we had, like some of the small ones we'd been accepted to. And the sales agent started submitting for us, which is how most festivals are programmed.
It sounds dumb, but it was so nerve-wracking because we had some offers for distribution, and I felt like, if we pull out of the fall festivals, which is very genre friendly, there's a chance that we get rejected from the bigger festivals and nobody just ever sees our movie.
This episode is brought to you by the best-selling book, Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, How to Turn Your Independent Film into a Money-Making Business. Learn more at filmbizbook.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Vanessa and Joseph Winter. How you guys doing?
Great.
Good.
Nice
Thanks
to talk
for
to you,
having
Alex.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, guys. I have not had a couple, like a romantic couple filmmakers ever on the show. So I was intrigued by that. And then the horror aspect was also more intriguing. And then the image that you guys sent, I was like, well, I mean, I got to have them on now. I mean, that picture is worth 1,000 words right there. So it's really good. I'm really glad to meet you. I'm fascinated with you guys. I want to find out how all of this happened. First question is, how did you guys meet? How did you guys get together, decide to go, you know what we should do? We should be horror filmmakers together. Let's do that. Like, I want to know what that conversation was like.
When we very first met, it never crossed my mind that this is my horror filmmaking buddy for the rest of my life. But we were in film school.
At the same time, it was so natural.
Yeah. It was total natural progression, like really quickly. But I was in a film class. It was like the first film class you take when you get into the program. And Vanessa was in the class. We'd never talked. She came up to me after class one day, said, I'm the production designer of a senior capstone project. You feel like a great fit for the art director to work under me. How do you feel about that? And that was the first time we really spoke. And I mean, it was because I found out later, everyone else said no, but I was really grateful for that because she was really awesome and we got along really great. And then I talked her into loving horror. I mean, it wasn't hard, but she hadn't been exposed to the stuff that I'm into.
Yeah. I was always into horror, but film school really was my introduction to cinema. I grew up in a small town. My family was like very conservative with what we could watch. And so in college, took my first film class and immediately I fell into the genre lane of horror and sci-fi. And so I feel like us deciding, we're going to make horror movies for the rest of our life was like easy. That was that was way easier than should we have kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you because I'm married. I have kids. How in God's green earth do you guys balance the family life, and the relationship with the filmmaking? Because both are fairly stressful, and both are horror shows.
Yeah.
If you have
that's
kids,
that's a perfect description. Like we were like. We've been hustling to become narrative filmmakers for like 10 years together, working lots of different corporate jobs, commercial jobs, doing the whole thing that everybody does. And then we got pregnant at the same, pregnant, had a baby, and we made a feature almost immediately afterward. Oh, wow. I was getting up at 3 a.m. writing scripts, like the baby's like 4 weeks old. And then we made a movie, almost finished it. We'd almost finished filming it and then got pregnant by accident. And so then we had a baby and then we finished our movie and then we're part of VHS and
it's honestly
basically we just run around all day screaming and then collapse at night.
It's really I don't really know how to answer it because this is when Deadstream production was actually going to happen and I still had a full-time corporate job, that was just looming over the whole thing. It's like, how? And I still looking back, I'm like, okay, I can see how we squeezed by with having a little baby and stuff, but it's like, I don't have the model to teach somebody how to do that.
Yeah.
And I've said this so many times in the show, we're all insane and there's an insanity to do what we do. But you guys are a little different. You're next level insane. Because I mean, you've gone to another place. You've transcended the insanity of just making a film. You got into a relationship, you have kids, and while you're having kids, you're like, oh, but my film. Like, like these are the thoughts that go through your head. It's fascinating, and it is just a testament to your love of what you guys do. And is there in the relationship, is there anyone who's grounded, or are you both psychotic? Because I'm the crazy one in my relationship, and my wife's the grounded one. She's like, no, we're not going to do that. And we kind of balance each other out a little bit, because if it was two of me, I don't know, I would self-destruct. So I'm curious in how the dynamic works and you
We're
guys.
crazy about different things. I think that's how it works. Like sometimes I get really scared at the scope that Vanessa will pitch about something where she's like, no, I really think we can do this. And it's like, that's not possible. So I start to panic in that pragmatic kind of sense.
I'm the crazy, like bite off more than you can chew person. But I've got a more chill energy where Joseph's got the performer, like he's got the excitement, but also the like
anxiety.
Things are going wrong. And I'm kind of like the even person, but I've definitely got, like he was just saying, my own set of crazy where he's like, well, like especially at the beginning of projects, I get super amped. That's like my place. And Joseph's like, okay, but like for real. For real, what's this gonna be?
There's plenty of crazy crossover though, where we're not compatible, like we just aren't, and we're still trying to figure that out.
So yeah, sometimes there's too much crazy.
I can see that. I can see that without question. So, how did you guys? You just said that you guys have been going, 10 years, and that's kind of the number I throw out to people. Like, how long is it going to take? I'm like, starting point's 10 years. Just that's how you got to look at it. You got to you're going to be grinding for 10 years to make something happen for yourselves. How did you guys keep going? I always love asking that question because I mean, everyone's different on like what you mentally had to tell yourselves, and you had each other, which is a blessing, but most of us don't. We're alone. We're, the filmmakers by themselves. And, I tried quitting 1,000 times. But I can't because it's a disease and you can't get rid of it and it's done. So how did you guys keep going? What did you like? Did you guys help each other out? Did one's like, I can't do this anymore, and the other one's like, no, we got to keep going, and vice versa? How did it work?
I'm genuinely interested in your answer if you want to answer first.
I was just going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head with the fact that there's a benefit with us being, having the same insane dream, because there's definitely like dark nights of the soul, I guess you could call them, multiple times where we are like on the verge of like tears, like, can we actually make this happen? Like, what are we doing with all of our time and money? Depressions. But I think that, the nice thing about being in it together is that, and I feel like the risks are a little bit easier maybe than for somebody that's like in a partnership where the other person is like, you're crazy, you're taking things too far, like for a relationship or financially or something, where we kind of we had the same crazy dream. So when it was like, should we mortgage our house to make our first feature, we were like,
let's do it. So the essential part,
don't do that, by the way, everyone listening, don't do that. That's
what I tell people. Like, don't do what we did. It just so happened to have worked in our case. It's not a good business model. Like, but in order to feel good about what we did to get Deadstream off the ground, we needed 10 years of, like, for me, changing my value system. Like, honestly, if I, right out of film school, had the opportunity to do a feature, and there's some version of that where I would have imploded, just looking back, because the thing I was valuing at the time was getting the film made, being in my 20s and trying to rise to the top, and like things that don't mean that much to me anymore. And as we were going along in our life, started to change to like, okay, I'm approaching my 30s. Does that actually matter to me? Is there a version where that doesn't? Like, can I just make a movie when I want to, like the kind of movie I want to? And I started to remove like the superficial stuff or the things that were separate from the love of the craft, and the things that I actually wanted to engage in. And that really helped not feel so panicked about the years burning by and having not made a feature. So, I mean, that's how for me, that's how, when we got to the point of like, hey, should we open up some 0% interest credit cards and like go for it, was like, okay, I feel like I've got a good foundation now of like what's important to me, and we're not willing to sacrifice everything in order to do it. Like, we're going to try to balance the family and stuff. And then it just finally made sense.
Well, and I'm imagining you guys had the same conversation that we all do. At 23, you're like, shit, I didn't make my feature. Orson Welles did. Then at 20, and then at 27, it's like, Spielberg made Jaws at 27. I'm just jacking around right here. What the hell?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Tarantino made Reservoir when he was like 31. And that just, the number just keeps creeping up until you're like, well, Ridley Scott didn't make it till 40. So I'm like, yeah, but he did 4,000 music videos and commercials prior to that. So that's you're getting loosey goosey. But did you have that conversation with yourselves as well as that time gets clicking away?
Absolutely.
Oh, me for sure. I've got an issue with like my, like, I don't know what you call it, the life clock ticking away, where I get really freaked out about time passing by. Joseph's a little cooler about it.
Well, no, that took effort though, because I just made a decision that was, earlier than you, about I'm going to be at peace about the clock aspect, and just have some faith that when I'm in the right mental place, and, things will just happen at the right time if we just keep healthily working at it and not sacrificing like our health and things along the way. But yeah, that was always there, man. I'm also pretending right now that it stopped mattering to me, but it always matters.
I love the neuroses that's going on here. You're in this conversation because you're just kind of like, this is really getting inside the mind of the insanity of a filmmaker. And this is not what they teach at school. They teach you about, you're going to be Spielberg. You're going to be the next Nolan. Here, look, we're going to teach you how to make $100 million movie. No one ever in film school is teaching you, look, it's going to be 10 years of grinding. You're going to want to break psychologically multiple times a day. Like, you're going to probably go bankrupt a couple times. You'll probably lose relationships. Like, I mean, they don't tell you all these things, but this is what the truth of it is. So I'm so glad that you guys are being so raw and honest about this process for people listening, because I hope it helps wake some people up to like the realities of this. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, because as a filmmaker myself, my wife and I have taken strategic, risks through my filmmaking career. At the beginning, I threw credit cards and almost went bankrupt and all that kind of stuff at the very early beginning of it. But as I got older, we're like, okay, let's strategically, how are we going to do this without a family? The second the kids came into the picture, it changes things. But it seems like you were able to balance having kids, because it's one thing, you guys could eat ramen. I mean, probably not now. I mean, you don't want to, but we could, you don't want to, but you could, but now when you have kids, it's a different responsibility. How do you balance the insanity of the dream with the responsibility of a family?
I think for me, like, I almost experienced what you did backwards, where I think I kind of had this thing coming out of film school where I didn't, and maybe it's because I'm a woman, but I had this feeling of like, I didn't go to school for a hobby. So I kind of had this overcompensating, like, I'm going to get this corporate job and I'm going to make enough money while I'm also chasing my dreams so that I could show that I can like make a living. And there was something about having my first baby where I was kind of like, oh, like, this is it. Like, I am going to make a feature now or it's never going to happen. And so I got a little bit more crazy and risk taking, where I started putting like childcare on a credit card where I had never done that before. Like, spend credit card money on, I mean, besides some student films, like, but I hadn't been really doing that. So that for me was kind of like the switch went off, where I just started saying no to all of my commercial clients, or most of them, and was just like, I'm going to do this thing, because if I don't, I'm going to regret it, even if it goes badly. So that's where I was. For me, a really interesting, I mean, this happened for both of us, but the thing that I like to tell people about having our kid is, like, before then, it was 24/7 film stuff, like what we would talk about in our house. There were no boundaries. It wasn't like, okay, at this time, we're just talking about our personal lives, like film, our ideas, the things we were working on, our corporate stuff. It was all just, laying in bed, talking about it. And when we had our daughter, there started to be some structure around it, where we said,
at this time, it's just family time. Like we have to. It's only fair to our family to do that. But it was so weird that once we started putting boundaries on when we would work on film, I became way more productive. My output was so much more than it had ever been. And I feel like that has stuck. So now we have that second daughter. It's the same thing. The hours of the day that we have to work are a lot more productive than they ever were before then. So there's that benefit that's come from it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we should have discovered you earlier, Alex, and we could have made a lot of smarter decisions.
Well, but that, well, I appreciate that. Listen, I wish I had me when I was coming. Are you kidding me? Can you imagine if a show like this existed in the 90s? You know how many millions and millions of dollars would have been saved? Relationships, psyches would have not, busted at that point. How many less people would be in the insane asylum right now if we had this kind of information back then? But so what were some of these mistakes that you guys made along the way that you were just like, that maybe you could talk about that other people can learn from and hopefully not fall into those same traps?
One of my biggest things, I think, was just not saying no to anything.
I did the same thing. Yeah.
And I think that with your, I think the advice that you give, like having multiple legs of your business, I guess you could call it, is a really smart thing to do. But I think you don't want to have 40 legs to your business. You don't want to feel like you're missing out because you're not working with this producer. You're not right. You're letting go some of your clients or whatever it is. And I think that I just had that for a long time where I was overworking, just overworking for not enough money. And then creatively, I kind of had the same problem where I always wanted to be a horror filmmaker. And with doing that, you take big, just in the nature of horror, you take big swings and you isolate a certain amount of audience. And I think that when I would do my own creative, projects, like a short film or something, I would have in mind, but if my commercial clients saw this, could it help me out in both ways? And as soon as I just started really writing and making the things that were purely Vanessa, I guess you could call them, they're just weird and just what I wanted to do, that's when audiences started responding, or that's when I started getting into festivals and ended up finding my management. And so I think specifically for me, there was a lot of mistakes in just not being focused enough.
And it sounds like you did the same thing I did. I think every filmmaker goes through this process. Is you find your voice, and then you have the cojones, as they say, to actually put your voice out there. And that's what people are, your secret sauce. That's what people are attracted to. Not, I'm going to go make a Sam Raimi movie. I'm like, well, we have Sam. He does them pretty well. We don't need another Sam Raimi. Yeah,
he's really good.
he's solid. We don't need another one of him or a cheap copycat. But there's only one Vanessa. So that's the thing. There's only one Joseph. So that's when you are able to finally put that out there. That's when I'm so glad you said that you that's when stuff started to happen, when you were brave enough to put yourself out there. I'm assuming that's the same for you, Joseph.
Well, the thing that came to my mind is I was afraid. In college, I was afraid to make bad things. After college, I was afraid to make bad things. And that actually kept me from I wish I would have made so much more things and bad things, because you learn a lot when you make something that's not turning out right. And you actually learn a lot when you make more things that are shorter. And in my mind, the next project I was going to put my energy into was going to be a 17-minute, really ambitious thing. And I wish I would have just taken the opportunity to give myself more smaller experiences, have things that I'm too ashamed to show people, because I did anyway along the way. And, I just feel that's how you learn. And I'm jealous looking back at my other friends that were jumping on these, I just got this opportunity to direct a little thing over here. It's not that good, but I'm going to do it. And in my mind, I was like, why would you want to have that on your reel or have that? But now that was a mistake. You should make bad things. You should make lots of bad things, and you can curate what you show people.
I think it's the same kind of itis that we filmmakers have. They're like, well, Spielberg didn't have this, and on his reel, on his film, you want your filmography to be perfect because that's the ego inside of you going, one day they'll be studying me in film school, and when they do, I can't have this crap out there. Kind of like you laugh because both of you have thought this in your mind at one point or another, because I did it. I think all of us do, because we all are insane. The filmmaker's ego is, oh my God, it is. There's the level of delusion we have. But you know what? I said this the other day. I was at AFM and I was on stage talking, and I said this out loud, and it was a friend of mine who told me this, and he told me I could steal it. My friend John Kim, he said, the delusion and the skills that you need to get a movie done hurt you after the movie is done, to try to sell it, because you can't be delusional when you're selling it. You can't be like, my movie's the greatest. I'm obviously the next Quentin Tarantino. Why can't anybody recognize my genius?
Yeah.
Is that, do you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I feel like that's for sure true. I just, right now, what you're seeing is me trying to think if I felt that way after we made Deadstream, like if I had the healthy mindset. I will say what helped is like, we're mature enough going into Deadstream that I grew out of so much of that kind of mindset by the time we made it, that we didn't have South by Southwest aspirations when we were making Deadstream. We didn't have like, the successes of the movie were not the goal. Like by the time we made this, it was like very pragmatic. It was, we're going to pay for an education in learning the part of the business that most people don't talk about or won't talk about, learn how much people are offering for a low budget movie, and like just like that kind of thing. And so, I mean, 10 years before, I wouldn't have made a movie that was just my best shot, but mostly for an education and mostly to just do something. So I think that's something that did help with being older and getting started with that.
Oh no, the 20s version of all of us we're idiots. I mean, which is absolutely, of course. I didn't make a movie till I was 40 because I was like, well, it has to be Reservoir Dogs. It has to like blow everybody out of the water, because again, my filmography is going to be taught in schools, and I can't have this kind of insanity. So
yeah, man, that pressure can really get to you though.
Right?
It's crippling. It's crippling.
It is because it's all self-inflicted. It's completely your own delusions in your mind. I gotta ask you, why do you think we do that to ourselves? Why? Because I've never asked this question on the show before, but like, who told us that that's the way? Like, what is and it's not just us, it's most filmmakers have this conversation with themselves. They're like, my first movie has to be this, and it has to be that, and and I have to be respected, and it has to win. What is it that we can't just go out and, like you did with Deadstream, and just go, we're just going to go make a movie. We're going to learn about the process, and if it gets in some places, it gets in some places, as opposed to, this is Oscar worthy, which I've had that conversation, not me, with other filmmakers who I've done posts for. And they're like, I'll see you at the Oscars next year. I'm like, see you there, buddy. All right there, buddy. All right. Let me know how that works out for you. So,
man, like, I feel like there's a particular kind of crazy of filmmakers that puts you in that mindset. In fairness to filmmakers, I feel like there is a lot of, when I compare it to other art forms, there is some truth to this like fear and feeling that everything you make could be your last, because if you blow it bad enough, people don't want to work with you and don't want to help you pay money. It's so hard to make a film just by yourself. Mm-hmm. So that does, I think, add to some of the pressure. I also, hearing other writers talk, I think this may cross over to writers too, which is how crippling it is to sit down and realize that your first draft is going to be complete crap.
Right.
And that's like a big mental hurdle. And I don't know if it's just because you're admiring other films that are so good or other books that are so good, but this idea, it's really hard for the idea to sink in that it started as bad. It's like hard to believe. Well, it's hard to believe that the first iteration of Jaws or whatever was probably bad, and it took a long time before it became Jaws.
One
and
of the
like,
biggest
yeah.
reasons is that's what they put in front of you at film school. Like they put the awesome first films in front of you.
Or
The thing about,
masterpieces.
yeah, the thing about Reservoir Dogs is it's not even technically Tarantino's first movie.
Oh, I
And
know.
like hearing Edgar Wright, it's like, but you don't know this really? Like it's not really talked about like that. And then I heard Edgar Wright on a podcast years ago where he talked about Fistful of Fingers, which he doesn't even want people to see. And I still haven't seen it. And he explains why. And I wish I would have been taught that in school. Like, here are the filmmakers who made first films that either you can't see or they don't want you to see. And then they learned from it and went on to make Shaun of the Dead or like, you know, something else like that.
Well, they don't. That doesn't sell seats in film school. I mean, they sell the sizzle, but they don't sell the steak real well. But they sell the sizzle really, really, really well. And you know what's fascinating is after talking to as many people as I have on the show and speaking to like Edgar and some of these bigger, you know, Oscar winners and things like that, I've come to realize in just my own personal journey that all of them go through the same things that we do. It's always shit at the beginning. It's always crap. They're nervous. They have to look at the same blank page you guys have to look at. And they just work it out in a different way. But it is, I think Hollywood puts it out there that like the story of Rocky, that he wrote it in like, what, 3 nights or something like that. He wrote Rocky. And then like, that was the myth. Like, oh, he wrote and he won the Oscar. And then years later, I saw an interview with Stallone and he's like, yeah, I wrote the first draft in 3 days, but I beat the hell out of that thing for the next 6 months, you know, perfecting it. You know, it's that kind of delusion that's put out there. But I think that's a Hollywood thing too. Like, I mean, it's been, you know, it's always been that way with this kind of the sizzle and not the steak, without question. So let me ask you with Deadstream, how did you guys, first of all, fantastic. It looks great, man. It's so much fun. And then I'm like, wait a minute, is that Joe? Is he the star of this too? Like, what? Like, that's tough enough to do it behind the scenes, but in front of the scenes, in front of the camera to be able to do it all. And it's like basically you're the show on top of it. So there's a lot of pressure on you, Joe, as a performer of that movie. Yeah, you got some ghosts and goblins and other things flying around, which are really interesting. But you're funny as shit, by the way. You're really, really funny in this. Funny as hell. Really well produced. It looks nice. It looks like, you know, because I see a lot of stuff. I see a lot of stuff. And in the horror genre, as you know, not always the highest production value. Not always. How did you guys decide to do, like, this was the thing, like get this thing off the ground? And then we'll talk about the South by Southwest call.
Dude, yeah, I think we started writing it around Joseph's strengths because he can act and he is hilarious. But it did end up being really grueling and a ton of pressure. I think we should like talk about why though. The reason is like we gave ourselves the creative prompt of like, what if there was a movie no one could say no to? If we made, like, could we in theory make something by ourselves? And that's the thing that led us to, well, that would, of course, I would be in it. And it wasn't like, honestly, we didn't think I was great. We just thought that I could act. Like I'd been in some of our other stuff that we had made. So it was like, okay, a given, it's me in a haunted house. And nobody else is in it. Like that's kind of what we were building off of. Yeah, I think originally we were like $25,000, 25, 30. Like, what could we do if we just strap cameras to Joseph? And that was kind of like, we were kind of like simmering on that like a little bit. And then I think once it started feeling like somebody who was going to go in and do a real live stream and put up extra cameras and a movie that was going to escalate from maybe a little bit more grounded to just completely bonkers 80s creature feature. That's where at least I started getting really creatively excited. But then of course the budget like tripled. It was having to pull something shocking. Like that off. Shocking. So that, I guess that's its own genesis. As far as Joseph's role in it, it became clear like increasingly that how difficult it was going to be because on the performer, just the pressure on the performer to carry the whole movie. And as we started diving into YouTube personalities and started writing the script and refining the script, we became really scared about how hard it is actually to talk for 90 minutes and have people care. And it also made us appreciate the influencers online a lot more, of just what kind of talent and art form they've kind of honed in with this vlogging style comedy, I would call it. I would think some of them are definitely comedic artists. So we started studying that a lot. And yeah, so it ended up being a lot of pressure for Joseph to deliver that kind of performance and that kind of nuance that could actually be watchable. And even when we had a script that was we felt like it was really solid. We have a casual writers group with friends that we would read stuff with. And even when we felt like it was slaying pretty well with them, we started doing some tech rehearsals and realized that the character wasn't there yet, that he was just going to be unwatchable. So anyway, ended up being a lot of rehearsals for Joseph. And then the technical side was also a little bit unexpected. Just how difficult it was to operate the camera. So a lot of the movie was just me, like, not yelling at you, but like bossily directing and saying, hey, pan that room again, but this time 20% slower. And all of this was like while he was trying to be in character.
So that was the thing that we didn't like. We had thought through a lot. We did not think through the part of operating while acting. Like, we just didn't. I didn't. And it was a completely different thing. It was engaging a different part of my brain than the performer. And it was just incredibly difficult. And like at the time, so I had avoided actually thinking about me doing some of the emotional scenes or like actually the weight of the movie, because I knew if I did think about it, I would clam up. I would get that paralysis before we ever made it. So I waited to think about it until we were shooting. And it really it just felt crushing. That first day was a mess. We had to reshoot almost the whole thing. Like, I just wasn't good. I wasn't on. But yeah, I mean, thank goodness it wasn't a studio movie, because we had the ability to pop in some weekends to the same location over the next few months and do some pickups just on our own dime on, whenever we had a chance. So that was fortunate, and that really saved the movie.
Yeah. So I think the missing piece, as far as when we talked about starting the movie, it was a kind of do it yourself. But then as the script progressed and the idea got bigger, we ended up bringing on a partner, Jared Cook, who was our co-producer and also our DP. And so this wasn't, he was so instrumental in pulling off how seamless the camera rigs worked, along with he designed the interface for the chat. So he was a really big creative force, and we put a lot of work into the tech rehearsals and camera tests to make sure the movie wasn't too shaky. Joseph actually had 2 cameras strapped to his head as the point of view camera, so that we could change angle or lens length. And one of them had a little gimbal in it to help stabilize, so that it wasn't a nauseating found footage, scary movie experience. So anyway, I was really happy with the way that the tech worked out in the movie, but it did put extra pressure on Joseph to camera operate. It wasn't just it wasn't an improvised, like, go act scared, tell some jokes. Everything was like very finely tuned with timing and where he was looking and how to execute.
It was a very precise film.
I'm exhausted, and I didn't even make this movie. Like, I mean, just what you're explaining, I'm like, oh my God, I'm tired already. Jesus. Well, let me ask you. So, like, how many days you guys shoot?
That is hard now. Because of all the partial stuff. But the first, we did 7 days back to back as our main principal. And then there were a few pickups. I think the way last time we calculated, it probably ends up at 14 or 15 days when it was all said and done.
With the pickups and things that you just go back and do. So I always like asking this question. We all are on set, and there's always that one day that you feel the entire thing is going to come crashing down around you as directors. I'm assuming that happened every day, probably every hour of every day. Was there the one thing that you're just like, I don't think we're going to make it? What was that thing, and how did you overcome it?
Which should we choose?
Oh, man, for me, it was day one. And maybe it's because I as like the director that was behind monitor, the schedule was more on my shoulders, but we had a huge windstorm that came through the very first day and blew off all of our makeshift duvetine on the outside of the house,
which was like we had to cover the entire house so that we could shoot during the day.
So we ended up like spending hours and hours repairing that, and then by the time we got our first shot off, just the morale wasn't there. The character hadn't really vibed yet, and we got the camera tech. We realized even with all of our tests, it just, I mean, they're not action cameras, they're not cinema cameras, so the consistency, there was just a lot of surprises. And we thought we were going to shoot the whole movie in 6 days.
Oh man.
So that was like a very like come to
back.
Jesus night for me, which was like coming home late, and just, we only had a couple hours of sleep anyway, but I just remember just sitting like awake the whole time being like, how are we going to pull this off?
Oh, that's what we
So
did.
that was the worst. I think that was the darkest time.
We literally sat in this office. It was like, oh man, it's like 17 hours after showing up for the shoot. And we were sitting here literally saying, how are we going to save the movie? Because it was like, this is going to crash and burn. We're not even going to finish making it. It's not. And then what we finish, we will never show anybody, because I did so bad that first day.
Wow.
But yeah, so I agree with her. First day.
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, when I did my first big film, a hurricane came and in Florida and flooded our sets completely.
Of course.
So we decided to write it into the script.
Well, that's good.
I mean, I wrote it into the so FEMA decided to set up at the hospital that we were at. So there was 10,000 people outside online getting food and water while we're trying to shoot a movie in the basement of this like working / abandoned hospital. So like we just like, yeah, just write it in, man. We can't. What are we gonna do? We have no money. So lesson for everyone listening. Sometimes you gotta write it in.
Yeah, that's hero status.
You have to.
World's ending. You're just gonna keep making a movie.
Again, the insanity of what we do. It's not that's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. No, that never crossed our mind. It's like we've got trucks out here. There's a dolly. We're shooting on the Panasonic DVX 100A mini DV, the best film camera ever made in the TV world. I mean, we gotta go. I even had the adapter for the wide angle. We have to go. This was happening. It was 5 days of, oh my God. Anyway, that's a whole other story. If you guys had a chance to go back in time to talk to both of yourselves at the beginning of this insanity, what would be the one thing you would tell them?
Would it be the beginning of the Deadstream insanity, or?
Oh, no. The entire journey of this 10-year odyssey to get to where you are right now. At the beginning, you're at film school, both of you, and all of a sudden you Marty McFly'd in, and you just walk in and just go, guys, I'm from the future. I can't tell you much, but I can tell you this one thing. I need you to.
I would say chill the F out and just like adjust expectations. This is like get in touch with the love of the craft and life. And then let's talk making an actual feature-length film. So like that was the thing. If you would have told me back then, 15 years later, your first movie comes out or whatever, I would have imploded. And like, I wish I could go back and just say, don't implode, like be okay with that.
I think I would have been like, look myself in the eyes and be like, you're never going to be good at commercials. You know, you're never going to be good at commercials. Just go make horror movies.
Unless there's horror
Find
commercials.
yourself.
Unless they're horror commercials, you know.
I've actually done some of those, and that was a lot of fun.
It's
Totally,
like,
I guess it's not like a whole thing. It's just a couple.
Every once in a blue moon, you get to play like that. Well, you know, when you guys work, do you guys work together as a team? Like besides Deadstream, like how do you direct on set? Do you guys work as a team? And if you do, how do you? I'm always fascinated by teams of directors. Like, what do you guys do? Do you like know what each other's thinking? Are you co-brothering it? Like, how are you doing it?
Yeah. So what we say, like usually, I mean, I'm usually in front of the camera so far in what we've done. And because of that, we do a lot of pre-pro so that when we show up, like a lot of like storyboarding with our iPhones and like making sure that the decisions as much as possible get made before we show up. That way there is less likely of the friction of having a completely different idea for something, which will still happen because no matter how much you prepare, things are different.
Yeah, I don't think we're on like the Coen brother level yet. Actually, I haven't seen them direct, so I don't know what it's like. But if we realize on set that we've been imagining something completely different, then we just kind of argue it out. And our luckily our crews have kind of gotten used to it, but we'll just sit there and be like, are you sure you want it to be over the shoulder? Like not a 2-shot, and we'll just argue the pros and cons until somebody's
out loud
convinced.
in front of the children. Are you can't do that.
On VHS 99, we made a goal to not do that. Like we'll be like, hey, sidebar. And then we would go, that didn't last very long. But like we started that way with the sidebar, but then it was so crazy with the schedule that we just there wasn't time. So we just had to say like, after a take, I'd just be like yelling over the camera, like, hey, wherever she was hiding. And we would just argue it out like that. So we're working on that.
That's you don't argue in front of the children. The children being the crew. You can't, but apparently they figured out that mom and dad are fighting.
It's a very special crew. It's the same crew as Deadstream. So by that point, they felt like our actual children and they were great.
Mom and dad are fighting again. Let's just take a break. Now, one thing you did with Deadstream is a horror comedy. Horror comedies are not easy. They're arguably one of the most difficult things to do in that genre because you got to balance how much comedy versus how much horror. I mean, Sam is the master of that. I mean, Evil Dead or Army of Darkness is beautifully balanced, and I think you guys did a really great job here. But how do you, in the creative process, think, should we throw a gag in here or a scare in here? Like how do you balance that out?
I always say a lot of like, when I think about the process, it's a lot of trial and error. So yeah, lots of rewrites in the script. And then I think on set, there's moments of feeling like, you know what, I think even if we have to cut this joke that we love, I think it's the most important that this scene is scary. So we'll make those kind of decisions. And then I think it still really finds itself in post.
Yeah.
Test audiences are really helpful. And there is sound design, like also transformed our movie because we were able to really lean into, okay, this is a scary like moment. Do we need to cut some dialogue? Really emphasize the scare with sound. But yeah, it was just kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah, if you were to read the draft if you were to read what we thought we were making when we set out to make Deadstream, it's a lot more jokey. I mean, our movie is very comedy, but on the page there were more little gags and jokes and longer monologues that we thought were funny that weren't actually funny. And like by the version you see now is way more scary than what was on the page. And that's because of the editing. Like we actually shot it pretty true to what that was on the page, but then we refined it in post and it was like test screenings and just feeling it out with different people where we finally were able to realize, yeah, this is like too many jokes in this moment. This needs to be scary. So I would say the secret sauce so far has been post-production.
Yeah. We also kind of benefited from being two brains, where I think because Joseph was the performer, he could really focus on the moment and the comedy in the moment. And I was very focused on things, the tension and the scares that I wanted. I was thinking about the movie a little bit more as a whole. And so that, yeah, unlike the super brain of Sam Raimi, we have two.
I mean, well, he's not human. Obviously, he actually opened up the book, and that's how he got his powers. I mean, that's just the way it is. Now, I always love asking this question, especially you guys. Now that I know the backstory of Deadstream, you submit to all these film festivals, and we all do it. You know, we're all going to submit to the lottery ticket of Sundance, Slamdance, South by, Toronto, the top 5 or 10. And then you get a call from South by Southwest What was that like for you guys? Considering that wasn't the delusion at the beginning of this process. You were just like, oh, I'm assuming you just like, let's just see what happens kind of vibe, right?
Let me actually tell you about the delusion. So like we weren't even, we were so like, we were so non-delusional about
We kind of hated film. Like, at least for me, like I had a thing against film festivals. It's like the rejections and just the lottery of it is so painful. We also live right by Sundance and go every year. And it's just kind of this looming, like, we don't even try. That was like my reaction to it. Like, I don't have any, I'm not even going to have hopes that they can crush anymore. Okay.
How dare they?
Okay.
How dare they?
That was a little rude towards Sundance. We love Sundance. It was just this feeling of like, we don't belong. You know what I mean? Like we're not going to give them that power. We're not going to submit to the A-list festivals. So we didn't, like, honestly, the biggest festivals that we submitted to were the fall festivals. That was like Beyond Fest, and there was Fright Fest and Fantasia. And those were like the long shots to us. The thing that changed the course of the movie was we got rejected by the big ones, except Beyond Fest. Evrim Ursoy, who helps run the festival, he called us and he said, I would love to play you at Beyond Fest, but I think you're selling yourself short. I have a sales agent friend who could talk to you, take over the festival thing that you're doing, and you could try for first quarter festival like South by Southwest and Sundance. And we were like, no brainer, no thanks. Like we're not that, like we have a
what
nice
a sweet guy. What a sweet guy.
But it was like, what's his angle? That's how I was feeling. Like, what's this guy's angle? Because he's just being too good to be true. Like he's being so nice and so sweet. So
we're like, what? This guy just loves cinema or something?
Like he's not real. He's being human. No. There's none of that in film business.
But the thing, like after we actually told him no, we want to do world premiere at your festival, we thought, okay, we made Deadstream as a huge swing. Everything about it, we put everything on the line for the movie. Why would we stop doing that right now when this guy's telling us there is a shot, a small shot, but a shot? So we came back and said, all right, let's do it. Let's talk to the sales agent. We withdrew from the path that we had, like some of the small ones we'd been accepted to. And the sales agent started submitting for us, which is how most festivals are programmed.
It sounds dumb, but it was so nerve-wracking because we had some offers for distribution, and I felt like, if we pull out of the fall festivals, which is very genre friendly, there's a chance that we get rejected from the bigger festivals and nobody just ever sees our movie, and these offers kind of go away. And so yeah, I was pretty nervous. So this is all leading up to your question of the call from
by the way, what were the offers? Were they any good, or were they pretty predatory, or they were like solid, or no?
I have strong feelings. I don't I usually say the strongest version of this, which is very predatorial in my mind. Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't listened to Indie Film Hustle, because I had no frame of reference. But you talk about the predatorial distribution industry, and so that was on my brain when I saw we got this very big distribution company that started talking to us after the Beyond Fest offer, and we were so excited. We're like, if we have their name on our movie, oh my gosh.
I know, and without you saying it, I know who it is, and we won't say it publicly. But when we stop recording, I'm going to ask you, and I'll tell you who it is. I know who it is. Go ahead.
And you probably do. And it was so low, and it was just deflating. And I felt offended, but also like, who am I to be offended at this? Like, it's just a stupid movie. And so basically, from that to like with the sales agent using the South by Southwest, like behind the scenes, hey, let's have exclusive negotiations to like Shudder. It's a completely different. Like it's not even close.
So you get into South by, and we'll get to the phone call in a second. But your sales agents, working behind the scenes to negotiate a good deal for you, because now you're in South by, and now it's a conversation. And because you're going to premiere at South by, hey, let's talk to Shudder now. You want to make a deal before this goes out, because once this premieres, there's going to be a feeding frenzy. Let's make a deal beforehand. Is that that was kind of the vibe?
Yeah, it was for a little bit more detail, it was going out to some big some big people first. So like Shudder, Netflix, Blumhouse, and seeing what they thought and seeing is there any chance of kind of creating not like a bidding war, but like a friendly version of that. And then when it didn't seem like that was going to happen, it was the conversation of Shudder's offering a really good price now, and they benefit from like announcing at an A-list festival. So do we go with that, or do we take the risk of it premiering and then trying to negotiate? And
roll
so,
the dice.
yeah. So we ended up, and we also we really love Shudder, and that was one of our goals at the beginning, was to be on Shudder. We just feel like that's where our audience was. So after talking with them and stuff, we felt like signing with them before South by was the right decision, and we ended up being really happy with it. Last thing I'll say is the name of our sales agent, Bluefinch. They're based out of London. I've never heard anybody have a bad experience with them.
I've heard of them. Yeah, I've heard.
And they've also handled the international sales portion, which has ended up being significant for us, which was great and unforeseen. And having somebody that's really honest and transparent and showing you all of the deals is just made such a huge difference. And I know it's so rare. It's so rare.
Oh, it's completely. You're a unicorn. You guys are unicorns.
We were so aware of that this whole time. Like, we kept thinking, when's the part where Bluefinch is going to screw us or lie to us? And they never did. It has not happened. They've been such a great partner. Yeah. And with the Shudder thing, I want to say, like, the numbers made sense. There's a reason why we said, all right, let's just go to Shudder. This is like, we're happy with this. But a big part of that was they wanted to take care of the movie. So it was like, it was a good deal. And there was that promise of, we will release you in October. That week that you come out will be all about Deadstream. And like, they really believed in the movie, got the movie, where the other distribution company that we're talking about was talking about it like just a number. It was like something they're going to throw at the wall, see if it sticks, and then that's it.
I've heard that.
So we were very,
that's very also happy. It's got to be so rare too, just in the streaming days, of having a streamer that actually is passionate about your film and is planning a release and a marketing strategy. And so that was also just really, Shudder was really great in that way.
No, so you get the phone call. What happens?
So we actually got an email because our sales agent got the phone call since they submitted. So I saw it in the middle of the night because I woke up for some reason, saw the email, and I was so excited. I was shaking, and I woke Joseph up in the freakiest way possible, just like shaking him. And I'm not saying shaking him. He's so confused. I finally get it out. Like, what happened? I'm not kidding. He went back to sleep.
No, this is what happened.
He went back to sleep.
It's a dream. It's a dream.
For hours by myself, just eating like canned soup on the floor, being like, "What?"
So check it out. We got rejected. Our entire new strategy rejected from everybody except for South by. So the South by was like the last thing we're waiting for. So we're not going to get in my mind. It's like, we blew it. We blew it with this whole thing. So she wakes me up by literally shaking me, going, "We got into South by. We got into South by. We got into South by," like that. And I was like, "Oh shit, her dad died." Like that's how I came out of my sleep, is like her dad died or something.
I'm so sorry for you.
But I also, as soon as I realized that it wasn't bad, in my mind, I was like, your sleep is so precious. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try to go back to sleep. And I did. When I woke up the next day, I was like, what was I thinking going back to sleep? Like I legit did not let myself feel anything in that moment.
Like, if you have a 6-month-old baby, it makes sense why he.
Oh no, no,
you could no.
6-month-old. I don't care if you would get an Oscar nomination. You're just like, that's nice. I'll deal with that in the morning. But you went back to sleep knowing that you got into South by, or did you still think it was the dad had passed?
No, I knew as soon as it was good news. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to sleep and wait to feel this. But I woke up being like, South by.
It's like Christmas Day. It's like Christmas Day.
Yeah. It was awesome.
That's amazing, guys. I'm so happy that you guys have. I hope this story. I mean, we've gone through the roller coaster of emotions here from the very pit of despair at the beginning to like, now look, we haven't been screwed. We're actually making money. We've made a movie. You're on the VHS 99 coming out. You guys are off and running now, and I'm so happy for you guys. And it was overnight. Obviously, this was overnight success. Obviously, it was very quick. You didn't have to struggle at all through this process.
No.
When is it out? It's already out in Shudder, right? Everyone can see Deadstream on Shudder. And when does VHS 99 come out?
That came out in October as well. So they're both.
Both. And
Yeah.
what's next? What's next for you guys?
It's hopefully more horror movies.
Nothing lined up.
Breaking.
Like, I'm assuming you got a couple things lined up.
We've
ready
got
to
a
go.
couple of things brewing, but not ready to announce.
All right. But you're working on stuff. That's all I
We're
matter.
working, and I can say horror comedy for sure.
Horror comedy. You're sticking in the genre that you like. You stay right there. All right. I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. If you guys have listened to me, you know what these questions are. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Let me tap into my memories of all the times I've imagined answering this question on your show. I feel like I'm going to go back to that regret of like not making more stuff and just being willing to make bad things, to write bad things, because that's how good things are made.
Yeah, I would say the landscape is always changing. Like things are changing so much that all the stuff I learned in film school, and I think you've said this before in your podcast, which is like all your heroes in the 90s or whatever, that stuff's not relevant anymore. So it's always carving out your own path. And I think there just is this trial and error of finding your niche, and it's going to take some time.
And also, don't make 20-minute short films. They're hard to program and make a lot of really short films.
Make them short. I mean, my first film was 20 minutes and it got into 160 film festivals, but it was 2005, less competition. I could have gotten into 250 festivals if it would have been 10 minutes.
We made a 17-minute sci-fi 3D movie.
No, it was 22 minutes. It was 22 minutes.
3D, like 3D?
An actual 3D. This was my film school delusion. Like, I was like, I'm going to make the biggest.
When 3D was like super hot, and then you got it was like this whole thing.
We built like
rigs.
Yeah,
we built. So that was when
everything
everything was being converted 3D, and we were like, F this, let's make real 3D. So that's what we did, and I regret it, honestly. It was like, why make a 22-minute epic thing? I could have made like 6 things and grown as an artist. Wouldn't that have been nice?
Well, that doesn't fall into the delusion, sir. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Everything's going to be okay when everything is going bad. Like literally every production, big stakes, small stakes, they'll end up being okay after the bad. It's hard for me to still remember that, but like, it's true.
Yeah, in life. The risk, when to take risks was I think my biggest learning thing. So I think, the business requires taking risks and committing. And so by default, you're going to miss out on other things.
All right. And 3 of your favorite films, which I'm assuming will be horror, of all time.
Okay. For me, here's the 3. We've got The Shining, Creepshow, Silver Bullet, The Gate, Monster Squad, 3 Amigos.
That's 6.
You can't make me choose. I've tried.
You were ready. You were ready for that. You were ready for the question. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Monster Squad. I mean, Wolfman has nards. Genius. You, my dear?
I'm not as prepared. I would say I love the original Alien. I think it's a perfect monster movie. There's a 1979 Russian movie called Solaris, which is sci-fi horror, and I think it's just beautiful and haunting. I also love from the 70s Don't Look Now with Donald Sutherland in it.
Oh yeah,
It's a great husband and wife relationship, but also just terrifying. And the imagery is super iconic. So I don't know if those are my favorite, but those are 3.
And where can people find out more about you guys and what you guys are doing?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Joseph Winter VHS.
My handle is Vanessa M as in Marie Winter.
All right, guys, it's been such a pleasure talking to you guys. And I really hope that this conversation inspires and terrifies people all at the same time. But I appreciate your continued success and congratulations on everything, guys.
Thanks,
man.
Very honored to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks.